love Grandma.
I don't blame her.
I wish you'd settle down a little bit.
I know. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Who all knew I taught the wrong lesson last week? Uh-oh, got quiet, didn't you? I taught the wrong lesson. I turned my book and looked at one from back in June instead of July. Typed up all notes and everything.
I thought that I was the one confused.
No, I thought it was actually the wrong one. I done things twice.
Well, anyway, it was a good lesson.
It worked out, I guess.
You can fire back.
Yeah.
It must have been one that I missed a while back or something.
That's what I'm going to go with, too. Makes me feel better. But this week, we're in Paul's ministry in Thessalonica. And I got, things have changed a lot in the world. That goes without saying. I mean, you think about back in Paul's day and just the early Christians, it's so different about how they lived their lives. You go back to the disciples. Jesus is walking along and walks up to them and says, "Follow me." They dropped everything and followed Jesus. And what would you have to do today to survive, to just stop everything and just go follow Jesus and trust that she's going to be able to get by? It's just a different world. We're so busy today, because we're so much more efficient, or whatever you want to say, as far as what we do in a day's time compared to them. Because they was okay with stuff took a week, or if it took a day, or whatever. But now we got to monitor every hour of everything that we do. How hard would it be? And I don't know if God wants us to. But God wants you to quit your job, sell everything, and then go on a ministry. Now, there's some people that are called to do that. But I don't think we could do that. I don't know how you could do it and survive. You know?
I don't know, I read, and sometimes I think that's what the Lord's asking us to do.
It feels like, I think it's, then you got to think, you got to tarry till he comes, which means we're supposed to work. Huh? It's hard sometimes, but you can't compare the two, really, because things were different back then. They didn't have to worry about health care because they lived or died, and that's just the way it worked. And getting their whole job and their whole life, for the most part, was just having enough food to make it through the day, or through the week, or through the month. That was what their effort was spent on: food, clothing, and shelter. If you think about it, that's all that mattered. But now, because back then the only way you could get wealth was probably if you inherited it, because it didn't really matter how much you worked and all that kind of stuff. It was hard to maintain or get wealth. It's just the way things are. But now, everybody's working like a bunch of dogs. And if you think about your day and you break up how many hours you're awake in a day, and how much of that is spent working, to get money, to whatever, to pay for the stuff that you had, and then how much of that time is spent for God. I mean, we're busy people. We do a lot more in a day than they used to do back then. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, watch other people that really don't have a job. And
Jealous.
And I watch this stuff, and it just blows my mind. And at least I'm kind of confident that if I didn't have nothing, at least I would be able to live. Because some of these people live, they get food, they get shelter, and everything. And just like you said, your basic needs is all you need to live. But I know we weren't, because we're enslaved to the financial people. We're enslaved to all this stuff. We really are. We made ourselves into slaves like this. But you watch people that doesn't have really anything. They figure out a way to make a living and do all that stuff, and really just basic needs, and try to keep an old car running all the time.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of those good folks are content to, I have close family members that don't have to work and get assistance from the government, and they'll call me from the tree stand while I'm at work. And that's hard to take sometimes. But then we get to think about, because it's beat into us, especially as Americans, that we have the Christian work ethic. And we're taught that we're supposed to work as much as we can, to do as much as we can, to accomplish as much as we can, make as much money as we can. And we're proud of that work ethic, of how much Americans, on that number of hours, we work more per person than any other country on the planet. And because of technology and stuff, we're getting a lot more done than we used to. And I don't feel like it when you go to some of these stores and these people look like they just come out of bed in the morning and they don't know anything. But we're so efficient, we get so much done. It's no comparison to what they used to be like. We're going to talk about Paul, and that's the whole point of this dialogue. His whole life was just consumed with trying to spread the gospel, and that was everything. It's just a different world. But like you said, you ever challenge if we've taught ourselves as being right, as far as how much we work and what we do, is that what God truly wants us to do? Now the flip side of that is, God blesses some people to make money, and hopefully He blesses those people to make money because they're good stewards with it, and they bless the church. We couldn't have electric on and a cool place if people didn't work and help support the ministries and things. So that's one of those things that, I don't know, it has to work that way. Because how many people would come if we had brush arbors and that's all we had on Sunday morning on a 100-degree day? How many of them would be here? Go ahead, Ted.
Also,
Yep.
I know we work a lot and do all of these things, but also the Bible says that, we need to work. We need to work to eat and do whatever, right? Well, what I've found is that we live in the freedoms of Christ, okay? And this is just my life. I'm not trying to put this anything to anyone. I like what I do. Does that make sense? I like what I do. I really love to go tear out somebody's bathroom and put it all back together. I really, really do. I love it. I just love the satisfaction of getting it all done.
Right.
And everything, and surprising people. They come in and they've got a whole new room, okay? That sets me free. Does that make sense?
It's a gift.
That sets me free, okay, when I do something like that, and it's beautiful. I've always been an artistic person. I was always an artist, and I drew, I painted, I was in the army, I was an illustrator and all that stuff. And my dad taught me this trade, so I took it, and it's still my art, but at the same time, when I became a Christian, I used to get all frustrated and all that, but when I became a Christian, I found out that I really like what I do, and Jesus set me free. So it's not like, okay, maybe I do work 40, 50 hours a week or whatever, right? But at the same time, it doesn't seem like it because
you enjoy
it's
it.
what I want to do. And, I try to do it for the Lord. I mean, I don't go speaking to everybody about Jesus everywhere I go. And in fact, I just talked to Tammy about this morning. I just finished a job, and the guy was pretty content with everything. And I love doing his job and everything, but I never really ever mentioned Jesus anything. I just hope that what I did and how I did it somehow, brought him, presented Jesus to him. I don't know.
That's why that verse where we do everything like we're doing it for the glory of God, and it includes our work.
Exactly.
Hopefully that's a witness.
And like a pastor, they got to preach the word. They're called to do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? But we're supposed to be witnesses to the world, and sometimes we have to witness in a different way. One time I wrote in this lady's grout, and I just did a job for her a while back, years ago, and I wrote in the grout, in the corner, in the dining room, in nowhere, somebody would probably put a plan over there and said, "May God bless this home." In the grout, right? And so one day I'm sitting out eating lunch at her house. They were still building the house, and she comes running out with tears. And she says, "I want to thank you for writing that in my grout." I said, she said, "Did you write that in my grout?" And I said, "Why? You want me to take it out?" I can. That was my first thought. She says, "Oh, no, I appreciate you doing that. That was really important." So there's things that you witness people with that are just amazing if you live in the freedoms of what you have.
And it kind of goes back, this is about Paul and how he went about stuff. And one thing that hasn't changed since then is if you have some success, or if people are paying attention to you, that's also going to bring on people talking about you. That's also going to be people challenging why you're doing what you do. It seems like no matter what you do, even if you're doing it with the right motive, somebody's going to be upset about it, or somebody's going to try to pull you down because of it. And that's what happened to Paul, but everywhere he went. And we touched a little bit in the lesson, but Paul was so conscious about that. It really drove a lot of things about why he did what he did, because he didn't want anybody to think that he was doing anything other than to try to glorify God. To the point that in this lesson, he worked while he was preaching. And the only reason he worked while he was preaching is that nobody could say he was doing it for the money. But he was so worried about they would say that it's not real, he's just doing it so he gets lifted up and glorified and things like that. It's a shame, but that's the reality. If you got some success, it's just human nature to tear people down. These were people outside the church. And sometimes that happens within the church too. But it just always amazed me how much effort Paul put in to making sure he didn't lose his witness. I mean, when he started talking about eating meat and stuff like that, he didn't do things not because they were sinful. He didn't do them because he didn't want to become a stumbling block to somebody else. To live your life in constant awareness of people are watching you, and do everything you can to not lose that witness. Do everything you can. And the sad part about it is you can do everything right. You can do everything you're supposed to, and people are going to make up their own notion. But you can't get to a place where that becomes a barrier to you too. That you're worried about what everybody else thinks so much that you don't do anything because you don't hurt anybody's feelings and whatnot.
That's why the pastor's job is really, really hard.
Yep.
Because they gotta live in that witness, and then to top it all off, while people get on him, it's like we sit here on the Sabbath and we hear about how we should live our lives, and a lot of times we don't wanna let that go.
Yep.
And so that makes him more or less unpopular, but yet popular. Does that make sense?
Well, that's why there's mega churches. You can go anywhere you want to and find somebody that agrees with you.
And I think Paul had that problem, because back then he was trying to spread the way.
Right.
Because that was what that church was, at that time, the way. And I think a lot of people didn't like hearing that there was somebody that could save them from their sin, which they didn't think was sin.
Well, in this case, there's a couple of places where people were still worshiping idols and stuff, and they had a business of making idols that people would buy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, wait a minute. You're saying that there's no other God but this one, then who's going to buy my product?
That's killer.
That's heresy. He needs to get out of here. Everybody's got their own motivation for stuff. But regardless of how much you work or how important you make it to make money or how much time you spend, you have to do it. Everybody has to live. But I think each one of us sometimes needs to take a step back and put everything in balance about how much time we spend doing some of this stuff. I know that I've had to, but you put a lot of pressure on yourself when you have a family to provide for that family. And we fool ourselves into thinking that things and opportunities it's almost like we're doing it because we're supposed to, like it's a God-driven thing to make sure that my boys get a car or something like that. You get caught up in it. You want the best for your kids. You want them to have stuff, maybe have stuff what you didn't have or whatever. That becomes a very powerful motivator to work like a dog. And if you ain't careful, you'll ignore the house of God and get your priorities out of line where that's a priority for serving God and being the best witness you can. It's hard to believe that working hard and being successful is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but just make sure you keep that. That's not the only thing. I think all of us at one time in our lives, or even now, have had to think about that, about what we do. But I've always thought the Amish type people, or even the Mennonites, where they live and kind of share a bunch of stuff and all that. And they took it too far on a lot of crazy stuff. As far as I'm concerned, it's not even biblical. But the idea of living simpler and being content, like we were talking about, being content with your gifts and using the gifts that God gives you. That's what Paul talked about that a lot. He said, whether you have a lot or you have a little, whether you've been stressed or not, you teach yourself to be content. And if you do that, you keep everything in line. That's easy to say and hard to do.
Yeah.
It is. You see stuff, you want your family to have stuff. And what will you do so that they have happiness? That's not necessarily happiness, but just be aware of that. There was too much on that, so we'll just get going. Like I said, we're going to talk about Paul. This is his second missionary journey, and he wanted to he really wanted to go to Macedonia, but he really wanted God to tell him to go to Macedonia. It's really what it boiled down to. But a vision came to him and said, "No, you're not going to Macedonia. You're going to go over here." And I like that. If you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. If you're truly following God and you're listening to the Spirit, you should be praying, God, what do you want me to do? Not, God bless what I want to do. If you ain't careful, we can get caught up in that. Because God will jerk a knot in your tail anytime that you get to thinking you're in control. He's in control. We got to live that way. And when he got there, he'd come into two different groups, and much like Jesus did. Anytime Jesus and the disciples came in town, first place they went to the synagogue. And that's what Paul would do as well. And he would go in there, and it's a whole different time than what we think of now. Because you had devout Jews who lived their life according to the Torah, and they knew all the law, and they were living that way. So Jesus and Paul would come in, and he would say, guess what? The law has been fulfilled, and I'm going to use the law to show you that Jesus was the Messiah. Now, if you've got something ingrained into you that I believe this, and somebody comes in and challenges all that, there's really two ways you hear that. You're a crook, and we're going to run you out of town, or, hey, that's interesting. That could be something to that. And that's what happened with him. Some people listened, And they may not accept it right off the bat, but they ask follow-up questions. And other people like, this guy is a heretic. This is wrong. We got to do something about it because he's preaching against what we believe. And that's what he dealt with too. And then you had the Gentiles who weren't part of it, like I said about the idol builders and stuff like that. But everywhere he went, either people loved him or hated him. That's pretty much what it boiled down to. Multiple times throughout his ministry, they would riot, drive him out of town, beat him, leave him for dead. Now, I don't know about you, but you think that would change about how you talk about stuff? If you thought you said the wrong thing, they were going to beat you and try to kill you? It didn't bother Paul. He told the truth no matter what. But I think sometimes we pass over that because old Paul's second journey, his third journey, he went here and he went there. We forget, and it's awful. I mean, I'm stepping on a lot of the notes. But tragedy, chaos, and outright evil did more to spread the gospel than anything else. Because they'd get together and get comfortable, and then some kind of oppression would come in, and they'd have to scatter to get away to keep from getting killed. And when they scattered, they just spread the gospel everywhere they went. So it kind of makes you wonder, if things hadn't got bad, would they ever left their comfort zone, and would the gospel ever got spread? So we got to remember that when stuff bad is going on in our life, and we don't know why, it could feel wrong, maybe it's the only way God can get us to move. You know what I mean? It could be what's happening, and we got to keep that perspective, because that's certainly what happened with the gospel. All right. Paul and Silas were no strangers to being mistreated in Philippi. They were stripped, beaten, and imprisoned, and this is where the earthquake shook the chains right off of them. And the jailer was so impressed by this, the jailer went and got his whole family, and they got saved and baptized. But through all that, God got people's attention. They got upset or scared whenever they found out they were Roman citizens, so they let them go. But before they left, they went to Lydia's home, encouraged believers who were gathered there. And here's the thing that always about this, it catches me. Every time that Luke or one of the disciples is doing some kind of journey like this, and they plant a church, and they start a church, and for whatever reason, either God tells them or they have to leave, there's always somebody left there to disciple the church, to grow the church. There's always a remnant or somebody to help drive things. Because we take for granted that we have the Bible. They didn't have the Bible. So they would come in and teach them and try to show them all kinds of stuff, and then they left. So they were left at their own devices to figure out all the questions that we have all the time when we go back to the Bible and find our answers for it. We go, well, what happens when you die? Or what happens if this is sin and all that? We go back to the Bible. They didn't have the Bible. So they had to figure out all this on their own. And you think about that, it's very tricky because the men have a tendency of, well, if you left somebody in charge and they ain't real careful, they could teach the wrong thing. Or people could go down the wrong path thinking they were doing the right thing. So Paul was constantly writing letters saying, I love you guys, but you're missing the point. And he was always bringing them back on track. I mean, it's amazing how the church developed the way it did. They didn't pick up the phone. They didn't have the internet. I mean, this was written by letters and just by word of mouth. And but God got the job done. That's the bottom line. So it's 20 minutes into it, and I haven't started the lesson. Part 1, ministry begins in Thessalonica. But this is the right one, though. Some believed, more were jealous. Acts 17, verses 1 through 9. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there were synagogues of the Jews. And Paul, as his custom was, went into them for 3 Sabbaths, reasoned with them from Scriptures, explaining and demonstrating that Christ had to suffer and rise again from the dead, and saying, this Jesus whom I preach to you is the Christ. And some of them were persuaded, and a great multitude of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women joined Paul and Silas. Now, I've highlighted that because I think sometimes we go over every part of this, and every one of his missionary journeys, there was always some leading or influential women or group of women that were part of these groups that spread the gospel. So when people talk about women's role in the church today, they don't read their Bible. The church wouldn't be where it was today if it wasn't for the women of the past, whether they provided houses or whatever. They were instrumental into everything that happened with the early church. But the Jews who were not persuaded became envious, took some of the evil men from the marketplace, and gathering a mob, set all the city in uproar, and attacked the house of Jason, and and sought to bring them out to the people. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and some brethren to the rulers of the city, crying out, "These who have turned the world upside down have come here too. Jason has harbored them, and these are all acting contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying there is another king, Jesus." And they troubled the crowd and the rulers of the city when they heard these things. So when they had taken security from Jason and the rest, they let him go. There's a lot of stuff there, but essentially they were staying at this guy's house. But let's start at the top. First thing he did was go to the synagogue, start talking to the Jews. And he spent 3 weeks, it says 3 Sabbaths, talking to them. Now, okay, can you take 3 weeks off and go talk to people about God? Can you spend 3 weeks? I mean, we work for vacation for a week here, a week there, and stuff like that. That's how different things are. He spent 3 weeks just trying to convince them that Jesus was the Messiah. That's hard to do now. It's just not an option. But he did it. And we know with Jesus, first thing he did whenever he was traveling, first place he went to the synagogue. But several of them believed. Some people were just curious. That's like that. Some people may hear something, it makes them think. They may not just jump on board right away, but they get to ask another question. That's good too. That shows us that every salvation experience doesn't happen right then. All right, I believe I'm good, I'm wanting to just take off. Some people were curious, and they had to hear more. So I don't think we always talk about planting seeds and stuff like that, and that's kind of what this is talking about here as far as I'm concerned. But another group got angry, stirred up the mob, beat them, and ran them out of town. And when they went to this man named Jason, they pulled him out. Even though he wasn't the one starting up the problem, but I love that verse where it says, "They have turned the world upside down by preaching Jesus as the Messiah." And they used their words, too, to try to get the Roman citizens mad, too, because they say Jesus is the king of the Jews. And according to Roman law, there's only one king, and that's Caesar. So they was twisting things around, anything they could to get even the law to turn against them and stuff like that. But they made him post like a bond in order to let him go, just because he let them stay at their house and fed them while they were there. So anything they can use, any system they can use, any method they can use of the world to make it difficult for these people, to oppress those people, they did, because they hated it so bad. But sometimes I think we skip over Paul's missionary journeys, and I probably should have looked it up at how many times he was beaten and left for dead or stoned and things like that. That's never happened to me. I don't know about you guys. I've never been beat up or rocks thrown at me just because I said I love Jesus. I mean, we're not oppressed. We're not beat up like he was. He went through a lot, and he just kept on going. Where else would he go? Openness at Berea. Acts 17, verses 10 through 15. Then the brethren immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night into Berea. And when they arrived, they went to the synagogue of the Jews. These were fair-minded. These were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word and with all readiness and searched the scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so. Therefore, many of them believed, and also not a few of the Greeks. Prominent women as well, this is a whole other situation, points out that women were a big part of this. But when the Jews in Thessalonica learned that the word of God was preached by Paul at Berea, they came there also and stirred up the crowd. Then immediately the brethren sent Paul away to go out by the sea. But both Silas and Timothy remained there. So those who conducted Paul brought him to Athens, and receiving a command for Silas and Timothy to come to him with all speed, they departed. I kind of fumbled around that. You always hear about the Berean church and how the Bereans searched the scriptures. That's where this comes from. They were known as people who, you can tell me what you want to, but I'm going to search the scriptures and know for myself. That's an example for every one of us, especially today that you got generations growing up that don't know a thing about the Bible. And if they just want to listen to the internet, or you want to listen to some mega church somewhere, they will tell you exactly what you want to hear. And you could be wrong. You could be living a lie. You could be doomed for hell. You search the scriptures for yourself. I don't care if the pastor up here, if he says something and something stirs in your heart, go get your Bible and read on it. We're supposed to try everything by the scriptures. And how many generations don't know basic Bible stories now? As far as that goes, how many generations can't read above a third grade level? That was a big part about having the Bible. And that's a whole big part about what drove our education system in the United States. The reason they wanted to have a school system throughout the whole United States, the main driver was they wanted everybody to be able to read the Bible for themselves. Because in Europe, a lot of people couldn't read. So if they couldn't read, guess who had to tell them what was right and wrong according to the Bible? It was the church. And they manipulated that. So when they came here, that was a big driver. We want people educated so they can read and search scriptures for themselves, so we're never at the mercy of somebody else telling us what God said and what the Bible said. You think we're off track from that, from our education system and stuff? Anybody got young kids? It seems like some of the young kids are either brilliant or you don't know how they make it through the day. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the education system is failed. It's miserable. Right, Eli?
Yeah.
See? But once again, Paul had to flee the city, fear for his life, and he had planted a church with new believers. Gotta love those people at Berea, because I love it when it said they searched the scriptures daily to confirm the message. It's a good example, isn't it, Bernie? But his time was cut short because those same people that ran him out of town from Thessalonica heard that he was having some success. So they went traveling. Think about how bad you gotta hate somebody to travel just to try to run them out of town. I'm always amazed by that. The effort people will put into it just to make life miserable for somebody you don't like. I mean, that's effort. I mean, they had to travel there just to, either they were passionate about what they believed or it was just driven by evil. I don't know how they have that much time to care that much to just try to hurt somebody. I mean, what would they gain by this? Going to another town, what could be the gain? The only motive was they didn't like them. And it was evil. It was evil in their hearts. But he desperately wanted to return to Thessalonica, but he knew that was not God's plan. I saw that picture and I just chuckled, so I had to put that in there. I set a guard word over my mouth, keep watch over the door of my lips, because I got the plunger to his face. Sometimes I feel like I have to do that. I learned the hard way at work to keep my mouth shut. It's a different world out there. But I'll tell you, I do believe this. It's getting more and more prominent or prevalent today. The devil's going to use every resource he can to either make you work too much or get you upset or get you too busy or get you distracted and get where we forget what's important. And they'll use people that you've known your whole life. If they're not somebody of faith, I don't believe they even know they're doing it, but the devil will use them in some way or another just to keep you off your toes and try to keep you off what God has intended for you to do. And more importantly, they do everything they can to make sure that they'll try to get you to lose your witness. Because they relish whenever you have a moment, and it's a normal moment. Anybody would react to situations a certain way, but they love it when you have those moments because they can say, well, you're supposed to be a Christian. You've ever had that situation where you try to say something?
I used to be one that did that to the other people.
Yep.
And I remember that everyone that I did, they were really true Christians. I mean, it really stuck out. They were bright, shining star for Jesus. And I used to try to make them just everything you can think of. And I know, guys, you probably don't hear that. You may have not confronted that, but I was that guy. But what I noticed with them, they all stood for Christ.
Yep.
They always stood for Christ, and they were very confident in who Jesus was. And that, in turn, made me turn like a dog with my tail between my legs and actually leave. And so, if you learn anything from it, that's where you need to be. You need to be able, even if you don't know the scriptures as well as it is, okay? Jesus was real. He saved your soul.
Right.
And just like they were talking about chains fall off, I remember when the chains fall off of me.
Right.
And the thing shut, okay? People around me they were calling me angel and all kinds of stuff, okay? So you become that witness. But really, if you ever have that confront you guys, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Because it was somebody weak like me that stood before them and didn't know anything about Christ.
I just think of those situations where good Christian men and women are living life doing the best they can, and they spirit-filled people. How many of you know that spirit-filled people can have a bad day?
Oh,
Right? And then when you have that bad day, that's the day the devil knows to bring that guy, like you was, to come and try to get them upset. And then, heaven forbid, you're having a day, and you say or do something that you instantly regret, right? And then Bernie talks about this a lot, but once you do that, you're just sick and you beat yourself up because you know that you should have reacted different. That's the other trick of the devil. He can't hardly win. I mean, he can't lose if you do that. If you beat yourself up because you reacted wrong, it's like, well, I'm not a good witness, I'm not good enough, or, I mean, it's just a horrible situation. But don't beat yourself up if you mess up. We need to forgive ourselves. We're forgiven. And if it bothers you, that means you're in the right place anyway. It should bother you when you have those bad moments. As long as your bad moments don't get as close together as mine gets, you're probably all right.
I've always wanted to ask their forgiveness. I've never seen them before, but I would really want to ask their forgiveness.
You know, it goes back to being too busy, too. I mean, if we're spending our time doing all this stuff, the reason why maybe we're having those moments is because our priorities aren't aligned with what they need to be. But that may not be the case every time. Sometimes people just...
I'm glad they did what they did, though. I'm glad they stood what they did, because I think about that a lot. And I love my life for Jesus. Just that simple. I mean, I'm not the greatest Christian in the world, but I do love my life with Jesus. I really do. And I think that was a very important aspect for me to be saved today.
Goes back to one of the original things we talked about was if you're having a moment, it seems like those moments are close together, and you feel like the devil's coming against you from every angle. You got to make sure you listen to that still small voice, and just like with Paul and the rest of them, maybe God's telling you it's time to move. Maybe the only way we move is just to get our attention. You know, you go through bad stuff to get us off our bubble, to go where God needs us to go.
In your weakness, He is strong.
Yeah. It's hard to remember that when the wheels are falling off the wagon and you're just being drugged.
You know, yeah, everyone has a bad day, a bad moment. And as Christians, I think everyone's really good at repenting, you know, and asking for forgiveness. I think what we forget a lot of times is we might have had that bad moment that we spoke up or actually did something that hurt someone else,
right?
You know. And you know, we are the Bible that the world looks at, and we don't take that repentance that further step we need to take it to that person that we might have offended, or we smarted off to, right, or we said something not really nice to, you know. That person still yet looks at you that way. They'll probably never have confidence in your religion, you know, again, and have confidence in you that, oh, they're a really good person, they're a good Christian. Because you didn't take that one step you needed to. You know, retribution sometimes has to be made. Right. We have to make sure, if we even think we hurt someone's feelings, just say, I hope I didn't hurt your feelings. You know.
That's the tricky part, because some people don't want to hear it. And then, you know, you need to be prayed up and make sure that God's leading you to do that, because it's just hard to know sometimes. That's just a tricky situation. It just is. Go on in.
Do good to those who despitefully use you.
Yep.
So,
that's the best witness. If somebody's mean to you, be kind to them.
kind words are the way they're at.
If they ain't expecting you to be nice to them when they're mean to you. It don't feel good. It don't feel good because you don't feel like you're getting even. But that's what we're supposed to do. You know, that's what we're supposed to do according to the Word.
Another thing, you shouldn't worry about their feelings, because they didn't worry about mine. They just told me to help. Hey, they just told me how it was. You know what I mean? And they really didn't judge me or anything like that. They just said, you know, Christ saved me, He can save you. I mean, they're basically the conversation, but they stood on what they believed in Jesus Christ. And that was a big witness to me. And if we weren't in an offensive thing, they could have offended me. We were in an argument. You know what I mean? They could have offended me all they wanted, because I tried to offend them. Yeah. And you know, it was just kind of a weird deal. But you know what? I think everyone here is a Christian. Stand firm in your belief, and if you ever run into any counter like that, do the best you can, because in your weakness, and you got to believe this in your heart, you are strong.
I think to Darlene's point, there's a lot of power in just
I'm sorry.
there's a lot of power in just to saying I'm sorry. and truly meaning it, and just saying the words out loud. There's a lot of power in that kind of, that approach. But, I mean, every married man here knows he said sorry for stuff you don't know what he's sorry about. Is that right? Amen? This is too scared to even say anything.
You ain't gonna get married, man.
Have you ever apologized to your spouse for something you don't know for sure what you done? Oh, you can't answer that either, can you? I'm sorry. But we need to be willing to apologize. I mean, like you said, even if you don't know what you did, you gotta be willing to do that. Powerful and affirming ministry.
You're totally right.
Yep, that's a true statement too. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, if somebody else is upset about something, how they perceived it, you gotta be willing to go say you're sorry. And that's a pill that don't taste very
I was
good.
at the restaurant down in Salem yesterday.
What'd you do?
Someone wanted to come in, I let my dog in the car, but I just walked in the restaurant and just got my plates all I got.
Correct.
And he came in, and I mean, he was.
Who got that dog?
mad.
Yeah.
And he was telling me, you left your dog in the car, and the dog's out there panting, and he's about smothered to death, and he said, I'm gonna call the police.
How'd that make you feel?
Well, it was right in front of everybody, full crowd in there. Well, it made me feel like a dog. But I went, after he sit in, I went over to talk to him. And I told him, I said, I just got in here, I had no idea that, I'd even actually forgot that my dog was in the car, because he was laying his back to me.
You forgot
And I
about
hadn't even been in there 2 minutes.
And
I just got my plates, all I had in my hand.
he probably thought he was doing a good thing, but he sure did go about it the wrong way. You don't know anybody that's ever left their dog in the trunk of a car for 3 or 4 days, do you?
Yeah, I did that one time too. Well, somebody stole my dog.
Left him in the trunk.
Yeah.
He never looked at you the same when you let him out, though, did he?
No, he couldn't even stand up when I let him out.
That's not funny. We shouldn't laugh about that.
What happened, I stopped at my dad's house, and I opened the trunk and just left it up. And I thought all the dogs had got out of there. Well, then when I drove about 100 yards up to my house, I closed the trunk down, you know. And,
He was still sleeping in there.
yeah, about 2 days later, I was at work, and when I started to come home, I heard him in there going, oh.
Well, this is one of the few places you can tell that story, and hopefully the statute of limitations is right.
But, it happened.
You probably, I mean,
I excused everybody stealing the dog.
you have to ask yourself, if you was in that situation with that dog like that, and somebody came in and just started, you know,
He was so irritable that he was screaming.
how would you handle that?
Well, that's tough right there. I tell
Huh?
you what,
That's tough.
It was tough.
Yeah,
It was really tough.
I'll just say you handle a lot better than I think
But
I
as you know, he did apologize to me.
Yeah,
Maybe you said the right words.
yeah, I don't think I've
I was
been
kind
good.
of,
It's hard to be kind when people are being ignorant.
well, you know, I'm getting to 79-year-old, I can't run. I have to stay alive.
You better be nice then.
Yeah, so I gotta be nice.
I like that.
You know,
I like that.
Well, all right, we'll go on to the second part here. Gratitude for your faith, 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 1 through 5.
you gotta show the Lord at all times.
It's not
So I
in,
apologize to him if I've done anything,
well, I don't know how much you
even
can
if
do.
I wasn't wrong.
Well, I had a thing, we're gonna get through the lesson anyway, so I'll just tell it.
But I just have to say that.
Well,
I was with him, my reaction was a little different.
okay, I haven't told you that, you know, all the coins that you give me from the baby bottle stuff that we donated to the church, so we wrote a check to give to the pregnancy resource center, and they're tickled to death and stuff. And I took that change and took it to the bank to put it in the bank. They took the time to roll all that change. It was $600 worth of change for the most part. So I took it in the bank, and the girl behind the counter, when I set it on the counter, she gave me a look like she could kill me. Right? And I said, I can give you time to count it or whatever, I can come back later, get the deposit slip and everything. And it wasn't no big deal. So I left and I went home. So I drove all the way back to her office from Salem, and I pulled in my parking lot at work, and she calls and tells me that they looked at some of the rolls, and a couple of them was dollars short, so she didn't feel comfortable accepting that as a deposit, and needed to come back and get it. And I said, ma'am, I'm in at work and I'm in Raleigh. She goes, well, we'll put it in our vault and you can come back in the next day or so and come and get it. Well, kind of like the guy coming in screaming about your dog.
Yeah.
And I said, she said, I gotta come in and get it and take it to the other branch 1 mile away because they've got a machine that can recount it. Okay, wasn't nobody could take it down there for us. We've done business with that bank for 75 years. But they couldn't think because policies and stuff. I wasn't really a happy camper, so I went back the next day. You go in and have, and said, oh, we got it all ready for you. They put it in new little boxes and stuff. So I drove 1 mile away to the new bank. They unrolled all your change and counted it again and gave me a deposit slip. Take a guess how much you was off. $1.60 out of $600 worth of rolled change. And I had to maintain my witness to this lawsuit. I was not a happy place. So I may have said, yeah, I'm pretty sure that our pastor and his wife rolled all this change to try to cheat you guys out of a couple of dollars. That's probably the worst thing I said. I don't hide my facial expression very well, but I am. I didn't say nothing, but I want to tell you, that's hard to maintain your witness when you're experiencing something stupid like that, whether it's your dog or whatever. But I will say, if it hadn't been the church's money, and me knowing it was the church's deposit, I don't know if I could have handled that way. It was just ignorant. But it's a good example for this kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know, maybe they're having a bad day at the bank and stuff like that. Holy smokes, that's hard to take.
You know, if they made stupid illegal, a lot of that'd go away.
I mean, how do you handle that and be okay with that? I mean, it's just...
You said to make a sale, but
Yeah. I wouldn't want to name them on camera, Bank of Salem or nothing.
the one that tells was.
Kirk,
Yeah.
can we interrupt you for a second?
No.
Carly, would you tell Kirk and these people what happened to you today?
What happened? You embarrassed
You
her.
want me to tell them? Yeah. She asked Jesus to come into her heart.
That's awesome.
She wants to be baptized sometime.
I'll bet your mom remembers that for a long, long time. That's why we come to church, isn't it? And time's out anyway, so we can dismiss there if you guys want to. I'll blow the buzzer in a second. Maintain your witness, even in the face of stupid. Right?
Yes.
Huh?
It makes a difference.
It makes a difference, just like Ted's saying. If those people hadn't maintained their witness, don't know if you'd be saved today.
Never forgot.
And you will be exposed to stupid. Do what?
He's done with the lesson, he's talking personal
Oh,
stuff.
so we're gonna do it. See you guys.
I want you served.